Every year, American families spend over $12,000 on groceries, and the number climbs higher each spring. Produce aisles filled with tomatoes picked green 2,000 miles away. Lettuce sprayed with chlorine wash and sealed in plastic. Root vegetables coated in wax to survive a 6-week supply chain. Meanwhile, 18 crops planted in a single month, April, can produce enough food to feed a family of 4 for an entire calendar year, from fresh summer harvests through deep winter storage, for less than the cost of 2 weeks of grocery store vegetables. The industrial food system generates over $1 trillion annually, by making sure you never realize that 1 month of planting replaces 12 months of buying. The record opens in the colonial American kitchen garden. For over 200 years before supermarkets existed, families across the eastern seaboard planted intensively in April and ate from that single planting window through the following spring. Root cellars held potatoes, carrots, beets, and onions through January. Fermented cabbage and pickled beans lasted until March. Perennial crops like asparagus and rhubarb returned every April without replanting. The system was not primitive. It was precisely engineered around the biology of each crop, what tolerates frost, what stores for months, what comes back on its own, and what fills the gaps between harvests. So what happened to that knowledge? After 1945, the refrigerated supply chain replaced the root cellar. Supermarkets replaced the kitchen garden. Within a generation, the knowledge of which crops store, which crops stagger, and which crops return forever was buried under the convenience of year-round produce shipped from industrial farms. A $1 trillion system was built on a single myth, that feeding your family requires buying food every week, 12 months a year. University extension planting calendars from NC State, the University of Maryland, Utah State, and the University of Arizona confirm that April is the single most productive planting window in USDA zones 5 through 8. The crop list that follows is drawn directly from those calendars, cross-referenced with storage research from the USDA Agricultural Research Service and Elliott Coleman's 30-year production data from Zone 5 in Maine. The knowledge was never lost. It was simply made unnecessary to remember. Until now. Here are the 18 crops you must plant in April to feed your family for a year. Crop 1. Onions. The 12-month pantry anchor. No single crop stores longer or appears in more meals than the onion. Planted as sets or transplants in early April, onions mature by midsummer and when cured in a dry, shaded location for 2 weeks, store 6 to 8 months without refrigeration. Long-day storage varieties like Copra and Patterson hold firm and flavorful well into March. Plant 200 sets in a 4 by 8 foot bed. That single planting covers a family's onion needs for the entire year. Crop 2. Leeks. The cold, hardy allium that outlasts winter. Leeks fill the gap onions leave. While onions cure and sit in storage, leeks stand in the ground through hard frost and keep producing. The University of Maryland calendar confirms April as the direct seeding window. A heavy straw mulch extends the harvest deep into December and January. Leeks tolerate temperatures well below freezing without losing texture or flavor. Plant a 4-foot row in April and harvest fresh alliums months after every other crop has finished. Crop 3. Tomatoes. The summer calorie factory. Tomatoes are the single highest value crop in the American home garden. Start seeds indoors in April and transplant after the last frost. 6 indeterminate plants, staked and pruned, produce enough fruit for fresh eating, canning, sauce and drying to last through winter. The critical detail is preservation. Tomatoes canned in a water bath remain shelf-stable for 12 to 18 months. A weekend of canning in August converts a summer surplus into a year of pasta sauce, salsa, and stewed tomatoes. Crop 4. Cauliflower. The cool season heavyweight. The North Carolina state calendar confirms April transplants for the spring crop. Cauliflower matures in 55 to 65 days, producing dense heads weighing 2 to 4 pounds each. Blanching the heads by tying outer leaves over the developing curd keeps them white and mild. 6 spring plants, plus a second fall succession of 6 more, provide fresh cauliflower across 2 harvest windows, and surplus freezes exceptionally well for soups and roasting through winter. Crop 5. Lettuce. The cut and come again staple. Leaf lettuce reaches harvest size in 30 days from direct seeding. The critical technique is cut and come again. Cut outer leaves 1 inch above the soil line, so the plant regenerates for multiple harvests. Succession planting, sowing a new short row every 2 weeks through April and May, extends the harvest from late spring through early summer. A 4 by 8 foot bed planted in successive waves produces enough salad greens for daily use across 3 to 4 months. Crop 6. Celery. The long season slow builder. The North Carolina state calendar confirms April transplants for celery. It requires 120 to 150 days from seed to maturity, making April starts essential. The plant demands consistent moisture and rich soil, but repays both with dense, flavorful stalks. Harvest outer stalks first, while the inner heart continues producing. Celery stores for several weeks in refrigeration and freezes well for soups, stews, and stock bases that carry the flavor through winter. Crop 7. Peppers. The heat-loving preserver. Start pepper seeds indoors in April and transplant them after the last frost. 6 bell pepper plants and 6 hot pepper plants produce enough fruit for fresh eating, for freezing to use in winter stir-fries, and for pickling or drying for year-round use. Dried hot peppers stored in glass jars remain potent for over a year. Roasted sweet peppers frozen in bags provide a winter ingredient no grocery store version replicates. Crop 8. Eggplant. The warm season protein substitute. Start seeds indoors in April and transplant in mid-May. A single healthy eggplant plant produces 8 to 12 large fruits across a season. 4 plants provide more than enough for fresh eating, grilling, and freezing. Eggplant, sliced and frozen on sheet trays, stores for 6 to 8 months. The critical requirement is heat. Starting seeds in April under grow lights gives the plants an 8 to 10 week head start, so they can produce heavily before fall. Crop 9. Broad beans. The nitrogen-fixing, protein-rich crop. Broad beans are unique on this list because they improve the soil while they feed you. As a legume, they fix atmospheric nitrogen through root nodule bacteria, adding fertility for whatever crop follows. Direct sow in early April. The plants produce heavy pods by early summer before the heat arrives. The beans are eaten fresh, dried for winter soups, or frozen. Dried broad beans stored in glass jars last over a year on the pantry shelf. Crop 10. Pears. The earliest protein on the calendar. Peas are the first crop to produce edible food from an April planting. Direct sow in early April and you will be eating snap peas within 60 days. The speed is the strategic asset. While tomatoes and peppers are still seedlings under grow lights, peas are already producing food for the table. They fill the hungry gap between the last stored winter vegetables and the first summer harvests. Snow peas and sugar snaps freeze exceptionally well and taste nearly identical to fresh. Crop 11. Spinach, the nutrient-dense speedster. Direct seed in early April. Spinach reaches harvest maturity in 35 to 45 days. The spring window is short because spinach bolts as temperatures rise, but succession planting every 10 days produces a concentrated volume of greens over 6 to 8 weeks. Spinach freezes better than any other leafy green. Blanched for 60 seconds and frozen flat in bags, it retains color, nutrition, and texture for 8 to 12 months, providing a winter supply for smoothies, soups, and side dishes. Crop 12. Kale, the four-season survivor. Kale is the toughest green on this list. It tolerates frost, heat, poor soil, and neglect. Unlike spinach, kale does not bolt quickly in warm weather. A spring-planted row produces leaves from late May through mid-summer. It continues through fall, and in many zones it overwinters entirely to produce a second spring crop before going to seed. Frost actually improves the flavor by converting starches into sugars. It is the only leafy green on this list that can produce fresh food in every season from a single April planting. Crop 13. Carrots, the underground storage vault. Carrots mature in 75 to 80 days, and once grown they can be left in the ground under thick straw mulch, then harvested as needed through fall and into early winter. Pulled and stored in damp sand in a cool root cellar, carrots hold their texture and flavor for 4 to 6 months. USDA storage guidelines confirm that at 32 degrees with high humidity, carrots remain in excellent condition for extended periods. A single 4 by 8 foot bed produces 40 to 60 pounds, enough for weekly use across most of the year. Crop 14. Beets, the dual harvest root. Beets deliver 2 crops from a single planting. The roots store for months, and the greens are harvestable weeks before the roots mature. Young beet greens cut at 4 to 6 inches rival spinach in iron and calcium content. The roots mature in 55 to 60 days and store in cold storage for 4 to 5 months. Beets also pickle beautifully, extending shelf life to over a year. 6 feet of row planted in 2 April successions produces enough for regular use through the entire storage season. Crop 15. Rhubarb, the perennial that outlives the gardener. Rhubarb is planted once and produces for 20 years or more. Plant dormant crowns in April. A mature plant produces 8 to 12 pounds of stalks per season. 2 plants provide enough for pies, jams, sauces, and freezing for winter baking. Rhubarb stalks, chopped and frozen, retain their tart flavor for over a year. The cost of 2 crowns is less than $10. The return continues for 2 decades. Crop 16. Potatoes, the calorie king of the home garden. No crop produces more calories per square foot than potatoes. Seed potatoes go into the ground in April. A 10 by 10 foot bed, properly hilled, produces 100 to 200 pounds of tubers. When cured for 2 weeks and stored in a cool root cellar, potatoes hold 4 to 6 months without refrigeration. Storage varieties like Kennebec, Yukon Gold, and Katahdin are bred for longevity. 100 pounds of potatoes provides over 120,000 calories, enough to serve as a primary starch source through an entire winter. Crop 17. Jerusalem artichokes, the indestructible tuber. Jerusalem artichokes are native to North America and were cultivated by indigenous communities across the Ohio and Mississippi valleys for centuries. Ohio State University Extension confirms a late April planting in zones 6 and 7. The plant produces dense clusters of underground tubers with almost no care required. A single planting multiplies aggressively and produces more food each successive year without replanting. The tubers contain up to 75% inulin by dry weight, a prebiotic fiber that supports digestive health. They store in the ground through winter and are pulled as needed after the first frost. Crop 18. Asparagus, the 20-year harvest. Asparagus demands the most patience. Crowns planted in April will not produce a harvestable crop until the 3rd year. But once established, a well-maintained bed produces spears every spring for 15 to 20 years. The University of Minnesota Extension confirms this lifespan. 25 plants produce enough spears for fresh eating and freezing during a 6 to 8 week spring harvest. The investment is entirely front-loaded. You plant once, wait 2 years, and harvest every spring for the next 2 decades without replanting and without depending on a supply chain that charges premium prices for spears picked 4 days ago. But it survived. The knowledge of year-round food production from a single April planting never disappeared. While the refrigerated supply chain was consolidating into a trillion-dollar system, university extension offices at North Carolina State, the University of Maryland, Utah State, and Ohio State published planting calendars and storage guides confirming what colonial kitchen gardeners knew before the word supermarket existed. Elliot Coleman documented 30 years of continuous, 4-season production from Zone 5 in Maine. The United States Department of Agriculture published the definitive scientific reference on post-harvest storage for every crop on this list. Colonial families in New England stored root crops and alliums from a single growing season, and ate from those stores through 6 months of winter. European peasant farmers staggered plantings across a single spring month and preserved the harvest through fermentation, drying, and root cellaring for centuries before refrigeration existed. They did not need a grocery store. They needed soil, seed, and the knowledge of which crops to plant when. Today, that knowledge is accelerating, not because the food industry permitted it, because home growers watching grocery bills climb past $1,000 a month started asking why 18 crops planted in a single weekend could replace a year of buying. Start with what your family eats most. If you eat potatoes weekly, plant potatoes first. If salads are daily, plant lettuce, spinach, and kale in succession rows. If you can, heavily prioritize tomatoes and peppers. If you want crops that return every year without replanting, put asparagus, rhubarb, and Jerusalem artichokes in the ground this April and never buy them again. The total investment for all 18 crops runs under $150. That is less than most families spend on produce in a single week. Potatoes store for 6 months. Onions hold through March. Asparagus returns every spring for 20 years. The industrial food system profits from the assumption that feeding your family requires buying food every week. These 18 crops planted in April prove the opposite. If this seed was finally freed for you, subscribe to Hank's gardening journey and hit the bell. Every like and every share helps break the silence. The next seed breaks free soon.